Delta 125, heavy contact departure.
It's like the south runway was the right one to choose. There's a big queue for the 8s.
Delta 8150, you're on the lightest runway 9 left, clear for takeoff.
Clear on the left, clear on the right.
Virgin 8 November Alpha, contact departure, safe flight. 2620 heavy, runway 9 left, line of white. Runway 9 left, line of 8, Walker, 2620.
A little bit of down stick. Okay, let's get our engines.
169er Juliet heavy, runway 8
Whoa,
right,
Walker Air.
Go from 8 left for...
This is not checking there. Across the Pond Eastbound 2022 took place on October 22nd, concluding the 2022 season of VATSIM events over the Atlantic. For those who are unfamiliar, Cross the Pond, often shortened to CTP, is the largest flight sim community event that takes place twice each year on the online air traffic control network called VATSIM. The first event usually takes place in either March or April and is the westbound event where all aircraft depart from the eastern side of the Atlantic and fly west towards the Americas. The second event follows in October and reverses the direction of travel to eastbound, with aircraft departing from the western side of the Atlantic and flying east towards Europe and Africa. The event regularly attracts thousands of virtual pilots who fly for at least 6 to 12 hours across the Atlantic Ocean with full ATC coverage and oceanic operations. In this video, I quickly want to debrief my experience flying the eastbound event in October 2022, and discuss what I think is good about the event and also some areas that could be improved upon for a greater experience. To help navigate the discussion, I'll split up the debrief into the following sections. First, preparation for the event, then the event itself, and finally the simulated State of the Union for the event. Preparation for the event. This year, the Cross the Pond event used a new booking process that aims to include the broadest range of pilots, ensuring new event participants are able to fly alongside more experienced pilots who are doing maybe their third or fourth event. The booking system uses a slot lottery that weighs on pilots' experience and also previous behavior. For example, if you're a new pilot who has not participated previously, you're more likely to get access to the booking slots earlier than a more experienced pilot. Additionally, if you've previously booked a slot and did not show for the event itself, that will score negatively and you will have fewer opportunities to participate this time, at least through the slot selection. I have participated in multiple Cross the Pond events over the years and found that both westbound and eastbound I was able to access slots usually a day after the booking process opened. Before this system was introduced, the event had a largely first come, first serve approach that benefited only those who were able to book a slot quickly, as slots would usually disappear within the first hour. This particularly benefited people who were actually available at the time when the slots were opened. So for me, the new system appears to be a lot fairer, and overall I would argue that although there was some resistance from the community when it was first introduced, it has successfully established itself as an equitable way to distribute slots to all interested participants. I had no trouble this time choosing a slot between the airports I wanted at a reasonable time. One issue with the event preparation this year is that once your slot is confirmed and locked, 24 hours prior to the event starting, you'll receive your final briefing documents and routing information, which you must follow and plan for. But you'll also receive your SALCAL code, which is used by ATC to contact you when over oceanic airspace. For those unfamiliar, I will provide more information about SALCAL standard in the description, but for this instance, I received an invalid code. The code was Golf Mike, Quebec, Quebec. I won't go into details now about why this is invalid, and if you're interested you can look at the specification for SALCAL codes provided, But what is important is that some VATSIM clients will not let you use an invalid SALCAL code. Looking at you, ex-pilot. To get around this issue, I used the code Golf Mike Romeo Sierra in order to ensure I had a SALCAL code that I could set in my client. This code did introduce a risk of colliding with another pilot's assigned code. To mitigate the risk, I noted the change in my flight plan filing and also noted the change in the oceanic clearance request. In the end, I never had an issue during the flight taking this approach and would recommend it for other pilots that find themselves in this situation. Ultimately, this is a hard problem to solve as there are more planes flying than available valid codes. Either VATSIM clients need to allow for invalid SALCAL codes, or the event planning team needs to adapt to the restricted SALCAL address space available. One way to solve this and maintain valid codes would be to distribute SALCAL codes progressively in such a way as to ensure that the same SALCAL code is never used in the same sector at the same time. This is close to how the system works in real life to a degree. In practice, multiple real-world aircraft carry the same SALCAL code and operational care is taken to ensure the correct aircraft is responding to the page. This would solve the addressing issue, but without doubt cause headaches for the planning team. If anyone from across the pond organisation is watching, I'd be willing to help with this. All this being said, I know an enormous amount of work goes into planning for the event by the organisers, and I tip my hat to them. The process for registering and booking a slot is a lot simpler than it was 5 years ago, and even with the small areas of improvement that I called out here relating to SALCAL codes, I do want to emphasise that I believe the organisers did an amazing job with the event preparation this year. The event itself. For the Eastbound 2022 event, I had selected a slot that would depart from Atlanta in the USA and arrive at Vienna in Austria. The flight was scheduled to run for around 9 hours in total. For this event, I wanted to change it up a little and decided to fly the Airbus A340-600. To add some spice to proceedings, I decided to fly the event in X-Plane 12, which at the time of recording is still in beta. This would prove to be an unfortunate choice, but more on that in a bit. Atlanta provided control for pilots supporting everything from clearance to delivery, ramp, ground, tower, and departure. Room on the ramp for my large jet was tight, but it was possible to start in a ramp position that wasn't occupied at my time. For anyone flying the event for the first time, use a tool like Volanta to observe the departure airport and gates to find a spot that isn't occupied. It must be said that in 2022, there's not really much excuse for it spawning in on top of another aircraft. Upon connecting, I received my pre-departure clearance, or PDC, electronically through my VATSIM client within around 15 minutes, and giving me about 30 minutes before I was due to push back. So far, all is great. The aircraft was loaded and prepared for departure in about 25 minutes, and we called for pushback clearance from the ramp controller roughly 15 minutes before our slotted take-off time. Note that when you are provided a booking slot for across the pond, the time of your slot is take-off time, not pushback time. This requires you to factor the time required to push back, start engines and taxi to the runway from your gate in order to depart within the slot allocation. Following requesting pushback from the ramp controller, we had to wait roughly 5 minutes before we were able to push. This was due to congestion in my area of the ramp, just something to be aware of if you're at an airport with a tight or congested ramp. Once I was ready to taxi, I was handed off to the ground controller and provided instructions to taxi out to runway 8 left. At this point, I was handed off to tower, and this is where things got interesting. As I was taxiing to the runway, a Walker Air Airbus A330 was following a little way behind. As I approached the end of the taxiway, I was given takeoff clearance by the tower. Maneuvering an Airbus A340-600 into position on a runway is not a quick procedure. As I was lining up, I heard the tower provide takeoff clearance to the Walker A330 that was coming up the taxiway behind me. Both the tower and I likely presumed that the Walker A330 would follow my aircraft onto the runway and take off behind my aircraft. However, the Walker decided to turn immediately for runway 8 left at an earlier intersection, And the inevitable happened. One thing I will note here is that rather than make a big deal about it, I just continued as though it didn't happen. It is really not helpful to slow things down during events by complaining or throwing your toys out of the pram. Both the tower and the Walker A330 messed up, they knew it, and so there was no need to make a scene. Generally, unless you have a real problem that will impact the flow of the event, there is no need to provide feedback in the moment. But needless to say, when you are about to enter an active runway on VATSIM or in real life, you should check both the runway and approach to the runway is clear. This is a real-world procedure for good reason. Outside of this incident, the ATC control around the Atlanta area was faultless and efficient. The only other issue I encountered was audio dropping in and out with Atlanta departure. This is a common issue with VATSIM at the moment, and hopefully it gets fixed soon. After departure, progression out of the Atlanta airspace towards the ocean proceeded without issue. Obtaining oceanic clearance was very easy, and the flight from here was uneventful all the way into Europe. I want to salute all of the controllers for doing such a great job with so many aircraft to manage. Everyone remained calm and professional. Unfortunately, I did not get to complete the flight as X-Plane 12 decided it would be fun to crash the sim about 45 minutes before we were due to land. As frustrating as it is to commit to over 8 hours of flying, only to have the simulator crash within an hour of landing, I was not too upset in this particular instance. I chose to use pre-release software for this event, and I understood the dangers of doing so. Simulator crashes occur frequently, especially in pre-release software. Many pilots who have autosaves enabled will restart the simulator and reconnect from the last save point. I did not do this, and do not recommend it in most cases. During the Cross the Pond event, departures, oceanic crossing, and arrivals are very busy, with aircraft moving through the same airspace with as little as 2 minutes of separation. Everyone is being sequenced meticulously by the controllers. When you reconnect after a simulator crash, you will be out of sequence and likely be disrupting the carefully crafted flow of traffic. Therefore, as disappointing as a sim crash is, my advice is to accept it for what it is and move on. This is the way. Simulator State of the Union. Flight simulation has been going through a renaissance period over the last couple of years. This is very much due to the release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 for both PC and Xbox. However, Microsoft Flight Simulator has not been a dominant simulator used in Cross the Pond until now, where for the first time it was the most used simulator platform for this event. This year, the breakdown of simulators used as recorded by the Volanta app was 45% for Microsoft Flight Simulator, 29% for Prepared, and 25% for X-Plane. So Microsoft Flight Sim has clearly had the majority of pilots this time around, but should you use it? The event should be flown by aircraft that are capable of flying the event itself. This means that the aircraft should be able to fly a published departure from an airport, follow a predetermined flight plan at a given flight level, and fly a published arrival and approach. In addition, the aircraft should ideally be able to execute a published hold. At the time of recording, there are very few aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator that can perform all of the operations needed, and those are narrow-body aircraft with limited range. This will change at the end of this year with the introduction of the Airbus A310 from IndyBuilds that is being provided for free in the November Sim update. Following on from that, in the future we can expect the PMDG 777, as well as the Queen of the Skies, the 747, and many other wide and narrow-body aircraft that will be suitable for flying the event. But due to the limitation of aircraft available that are fully capable of performing all of the possible procedures, I would not fly in Microsoft Flight Sim at this time. For most people, you'll likely be fine assuming your aircraft is largely capable of following a flight plan. But holds and offsets is usually where things can go wrong in less capable aircraft simulations. So for these reasons and others, I chose to fly an X-Plane 12, although X-Plane 11 would have been just fine as well. X-Plane has a large selection of aircraft that can perform all of the required procedures expected for the event. But it is clear that Microsoft Flight Simulator is on a meteoric rise, and I look forward to the next event where I may just be in an older Airbus crossing the pond. In summary, I had a great time this year flying both the westbound and the eastbound events. The event planning and execution appears to improve year over year, and the size of the event still makes this one of the most premier VATSIM events out there. If you are new to flight sim and VATSIM, then definitely keep this event on your calendar, as it will be like no other event that you take part in. I also want to send my sincere thanks to everyone involved, all of the event planning team, especially all of the amazing controllers keeping the skies flowing, and of course all the thousands of pilots taking their virtual planes eastbound across the pond. Although I didn't quite make it to Vienna, I had a lot of fun trying. See you all in 2023 for westbound, but until next time, blue skies and soft landings.